and kicking us off. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Representative Giovanni Capriglione. He's a member of the Texas House of Representatives. He currently serves on the House Committee on Pension, Investment, and Financial Services and the House Committee on Appropriations. He is the chairman of the Innovation and Technology Caucus and a member of the following House caucuses: Manufacturers Caucus, Rural Caucus, Sportsmen's Caucus, Veterans Caucus, Farm to Table Caucus, and the Fine Arts Education Caucus. Representative Giovanni also chairs the Tarrant County delegation. He has authored several bills on cybersecurity and broadband access in Texas. Last year, he closed out our Houston Cyber Summit with a fireside chat with me on legislative issues. It's an event that I thought was fun, and I still remember with a smile. On a personal note, he's married, father of 3 children. Welcome, Representative Capriglione, and thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
I am good, thanks. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you too.
Thanks. Well, I will hand over to you, and then I'll come back at the end, and we can go through questions.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Hey, hi everybody. Good morning. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Giovanni Capriglione, and I'm a Texas State Representative. I represent an area in Northeast Tarrant County. If you've ever been to the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, you've been to my district. I wanted to talk to you today about a lot of different things that we were able to do during this past session. And as you probably know, we've had a few extra special sessions this particular year. We just finished our 3rd special session, and it was a lot of effort. Obviously, we were in the news a lot about the fact that some of our members went to DC, that we passed a lot of bills, some of them controversial and not. But tucked in the way of all of that, I think, were some really big wins for cybersecurity, for IT, and for making sure that Texas is on the leading edge when it comes to not only technology, but also protecting individuals' data. One of the things that, just a little bit more about me, just for a second. So I used to be an engineer. I used to work for some big internet companies, technology networking companies. I went into the semiconductor space and used to work on a team designing high-speed Ethernet chips and devices up to 10 gigabit per second, which at the time was pretty high speed. I worked on a lot of different things. I work on the finance side of things. I work on the budget. I work on investments for the state. But one of the things that I always obviously naturally got readjusted to and attracted to was technology. And a few years ago, I worked on a pretty big bill for the state, the Texas Cybersecurity Act, along with some other representatives and senators, to kind of kick off what I've felt, and I still believe, is one of the biggest risks to Texans, right? We've always worried about hurricanes and tornadoes and now power and energy and those sorts of things. But as technology has advanced, so has the risks for that. As the amount of data that's being collected by our government and our state grows, as the population grows, also increase the amount of risk to individuals and persons. So what I wanted to do is talk about some of the legislative advances that we've had, but I guess I'll start off with saying that while I may talk about the people who filed these bills and passed these bills in the legislature, completely all the credit goes to the Texans who I've worked with, a lot of people in the cybersecurity space, in the technology space, some of the larger, even some of the smaller tech companies who provided input along the way. And I say that, one, because it's an accurate representation of how these bills get passed is through support from individuals, but also to say that as we prepare for the next session, which is just about a year away from now, I'm always looking for input. Your state representative and your state senator is always looking for input on how and what we should be doing when it comes to protecting our cybersecurity stance in Texas. Now, there have been some really cool things that happened this session. Right before the beginning of the session, I was nominated and appointed the chair of the Innovation and Technology Caucus. I'm proud to say that it is now the largest bipartisan caucus in the Texas legislature. And I think that's a sign of how much interest there is in this topic. You all know it because you're in the field, but we're getting a lot of members, a lot of representatives, elected officials, and others who want to know more about it. So what the IT caucus has done, first of all, it's raised a lot of money, and it uses that money to educate other members. And so just as an example, we're preparing a bunch of tours to go visit, at least right now, Houston, Austin, and the DFW area. But if there's other places you think we should go to, or other places where you'd like to see your elected officials come and visit, we're looking to do that. And the job, again, is to educate our members. We had, for example, a lot of conversations with our members about cybersecurity, about what that means, about ransomware, malware attacks, all those kind of things, so that they can be better prepared when dealing with their constituents and also their businesses. Also, worked a lot on things that they found interesting, right? So during the middle of the session, I realized that a lot of members were really interested in Bitcoin and investing in all sorts of weird digital coin currencies. So what we did is we found kind of a YouTube sensation. His name is BitBoy, and we flew him in to go and give members kind of a high level and mid-level view of not only Bitcoins, but blockchain technology. We've also been involved in things like with the Texas Blockchain Council, so that we can work closely with them and with the bill that was passed, so that we can start looking at where we can use blockchain technology in the state, for the state, but also looking at current laws and see maybe how they can or need to be adjusted so that we can incorporate blockchain technology, for instance, and all of the security and the technological advances that come with that. Now, I mentioned, and that was kind of the teaser, some of the things that that really went well for cybersecurity during the regular session. And there's two other members I do have to say that along with me have been really active in that space, and that's Senator Jane Nelson and Senator Angela Paxton from the DFW area, who have spent a lot of time on this as well and have been really critical in getting a lot of this done. As you may know, the federal government gave the states a lot of money in order to prepare for COVID, right? And so that's gone to everywhere from getting PPE to making sure that we have doctors and nurses and other medical professionals available at hospitals. We've gotten all of this money, and exactly 48 hours ago, we passed the bill that funds a lot of these things. It helps pay for unemployment insurance. It helps pay for some help with retired teachers' health care and others that have seen huge costs because of COVID. But tucked away in all of that is $200 million for cybersecurity. And it's specifically placed in a fund that Senator Nelson and I created during the regular session. So that's that bill. If you want to look it up, it's House Bill 4018. And what it does is it's a fund that's gone, and it will be used for cybersecurity and legacy modernization. And so we were able to fund, and it passed, and all of that with $200 million. That's a lot of zeros to go and do that. And part of the reason is, a lot of businesses, of course, spend money on IT, and they want to make sure that they have servers and services that are fast enough and quick enough and secure enough to deal with their customers. Well, the state has always been lagging on that. I love the state of Texas, but when it comes to IT, it has, up until now, relegated it lower on the priority. We have machines still today in your Texas government that were built 1960, 1965, 1974, really critical pieces of equipment. And we are literally hiring, and continue to hire Fortran experts, COBOL experts, others to try and keep these things going. So we need to modernize. We need to make sure that we do that, so that way that equipment and that software is not only sufficient for now an almost 30 million person population in Texas, but also to be able to be updated and upgraded and have the latest items. That's a fund that's going to be managed. It's kind of a first of its kind type of fund where members of the legislature, 3 from the House and 3 from the Senate, are going to be overseeing that. And one of the reasons to do that is, and this is where I'll just, I guess, be a little bit more blunt, is that sometimes the legislature will fund IT projects and not really oversee those investments. And then 2, 3, 4 years goes by, maybe the project has gone over budget, maybe the project isn't done yet, maybe it doesn't do what it was supposed to do. And mostly it works, but when it doesn't, the problem is then the legislature feels hesitant to do it again. So one of the goals of this is to make sure that we're involved, we're engaged, but also make sure that it's done so that way we can minimize any sort of reluctance later on putting even more money and putting even more resources into cybersecurity. Now, some of the things that we worked on and is a direct result of things that we're hearing. Okay, cybersecurity is more important now than ever. We've seen increased threats coming from all over the world. Little quick story in my district, about a year, I guess it's been a year and a half, 2 years ago, just a global event happened where the United States went and used a missile to basically take out an Iranian general, I guess, who was in Iraq. And you don't think about, okay, this is something that's happening almost on the other end of the world. Well, almost immediately, one of my school districts in where I am immediately started to see an increase in cyber attacks from Iran. Okay, so the world is global, the world is flat, and it's Texas versus the world a lot of times. And unfortunately, it's also your school district versus the world. It's your city or town versus the world, your county versus the world. And so as we work on this, what we want to make sure is that as we see these increased threats, we know that there's sophisticated criminals who are doing this either as part of a national interest, doing it for private gain or organizational gain when it comes for money or just today, even extortion. And that's what we've seen here in Texas. We've seen the number of ransomware attacks go through the roof, malware attacks, but we're also seeing those attacks happening on our government entities. And I would say on the state level, of course, the state, since it spends a significant amount of money and resources and expertise, has been able to rebuff most of those. But school districts and others just don't have those kind of resources. And so some of what we're going to be doing is looking at how we can help, the state can go and help and do that. To that end, we passed the bill, Senator Nelson and myself, we passed the bill last session, HB 475, which looks at a lot of different ones. One of the things that it does, for instance, is it created a regional cybersecurity working groups, right? So what we're going to be able to do is with DIR, our Texas Department of Information Resources overseeing all of this, is create these regional areas where the state, where our Texas military department, our experts and others can kind of create these regional sections that provide and share information amongst those areas, but also provide early warnings for the other regions and be able to share that expertise at a higher level. Now, one of the things that's part of that also is we've created and we call it a volunteer incident response team. So what this does is allows DIR to establish a volunteer team to provide rapid response assistance to participating. So we have qualifications and eligibilities and acceptance. But if you're interested at all in the case, for instance, that some regional attack hits, and we're talking about not a minor thing, right? We're talking about something that could shut down critical infrastructure or provides significant risk to public security, then we could call up these volunteers to go and help, whether it's resetting systems, providing information that they may know or their skill set. So if after this you're interested in being part of this volunteer response team, I'm more than happy to help you. And that's a way that you can help Texas, help Texans. Now, what we also did is that we who worked on cloud risk management. Okay, so a lot of the data that's being collected about individuals, and I say that to say that, you know, you may have your driver's license information, you may need to redo your hunting license, for instance, or you may be a teacher and you have information that you send back and forth to the state, or maybe you're a doctor or a dentist, and so you're having to provide this information to the state. A lot of that information is held in the cloud. A lot of that most of that information is held here in the state of Texas. What we wanted to do is make sure that we go in and we audit and we require when we go to third parties, for instance, that information is held and it's held security, and that they're able to provide. Anyway, we're able to provide a certain amount of audit and level of expectance of what these third-party cloud computing centers are. For instance, we should not have cloud computing in another country, right? We should go and make sure that they're following all the latest guidelines. Now, as part of this, and I talked about data a lot, and the reason why is because that's what people are trying to get to. That's what people are trying to stop your access to. So what we also did this session, which I'm pretty excited about, is we've created for our agency's data management committee that goes through and looks at each agency, making sure that they have an officer in charge on what information is collected. And it spans the range of the things that this data management officers and committee will look at. Everything from what information is being collected, why are you collecting this information, all the way up to what are the ethical considerations when it comes to having this data and using this data, right? So that's kind of a different way of us looking at it. Because before, you know, you call the state or you call your local department and they'll say, hey, what's your phone number? What's your email? What's your social security number? And it's like, well, why do you need, is that necessary for us in order to do what you need to do? Other thing that happened as we were looking at data and collecting of data, which of course is at risk of bad actors, is what is information that we don't think the state should be collecting at all? And a lot of this happened during COVID, where we had, we just got a lot of emails, we got a lot of phone calls and everything about, during COVID, about contact tracing, right? And of course it's important, especially during the middle of the pandemic, for the state to know and where are the hot spots, how many infections are there, where can the state go and maybe set up a new health center or whatever. But when it came to the contact tracing, we heard, and I would say for the first time in a long time, real conversations from individuals at home who were worried about privacy, okay, who were worried about what that information and who is going to use it. So what we did in this bill is we now say that agencies, before collecting some of this stuff, need the written agreement by individuals in the state. So for instance, global positioning system technology, in other words, your precise geophysical location, it's not something the state can now get without asking, without your specific opt-in. We said that that also includes biometric identifiers. So for instance, the state can't collect biometric information, whether that's facial information or fingerprint information, without your written consent. And that also, what we did is it includes contact tracing information, right? So the state can't, without your knowledge and without your permission, start including you in databases and so on. As we started working on that data and make sure that we had those cybersecurity protections, what we've knew and what I guess we've always known is that putting money into computers is important, making sure that data is protected is important, that we don't collect too much data is important. But also, at the end of the day, we're all humans and we're all people, and sometimes we're the problem. Sometimes it's us that leave the doors open, that don't redo the update, that click the link that you shouldn't click. And so what we passed over the last 2 sessions was legislation requiring every government employee that uses a computer. So in other words, any government employee that at least 25% of the time has access to and uses a government computer. And this includes cities, includes counties, it includes school districts, it includes others. Then all of those individuals now have to go through cybersecurity training once a year, which is kind of a big deal, right? So now if you're an administrator in a city, once a year you have to go to DIR, and what we were able to do is we have, as I checked, over 90 different training modules you can choose, everywhere from hour-long sessions all the way to days-long, from free to not free. And what we're going to be able to, what this does, and it's now an actual requirement, right? Which is what we did this session. It's not a voluntary deal. It is now required that all of these employees get up to speed. So that they understand why they need to change their password, how often to change their passwords, what some of the top ways that bad actors try and get access to government computers. We were able to go and get that done. Now, part of the reason, of course, and we're trying to do all of this is because people are requiring it, okay? Just not too long ago, of course, it was before my special session, so I'm not sure, but maybe a couple of months ago, when the country was hit by an attack on a huge piece of critical infrastructure, that gas pipeline that goes from Texas all the way up to the East Coast. And I think that's probably the first time in a long time, and probably the biggest one in a long way, where millions of individuals were affected. And all of you on the phone call know that was a big hit, but they could be larger, right? And they can happen from anywhere. And so what we're hearing from constituents is, hey, this is affecting my fuel. I mean, this is affecting potentially my access to health. Whereas before it was not just, but it was, hey, it's spam. It's a virus that messed up my computer. My computer's locked out. Now it's actually, I think it's finally reaching the level of mind share for the average individual. Now, as we've been working on all of these cybersecurity things, technology keeps advancing, right? So it was maybe, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago when I got my first ride in an autonomous vehicle in Austin. I'll tell you, it was interesting. Of course, I love the technology about it, but there's something about going in a car going 30, 40 miles an hour without an actual person on the steering wheel. But what I got to thinking about was, and of course, a lot of you probably have already thought about, is that's cool, but can someone get access to the vehicle some way? Is there a risk? And you know, it won't be too long. And after my ride, I think it won't be that long at all before there's going to be a lot of vehicles running around in the country, driving around in the country, some of them with people, you know, traveling across our roads. That could be a potential risk for a hacker or somebody else like that from going on it. So that's one of the areas that I think that that we need to look at, and we need to get trained on and go and look at it. The other side is on a blockchain, and I mentioned before about what we're doing. We have Tan Parker, Representative Tan Parker, soon to be Senator Tan Parker, created a bill, and it's the first one in the state where we're having a group of legislators and a huge number of private individuals who can be part of this board that will go and start looking at how blockchain technology can be used inside the state. So here's a kind of obvious example and kind of not. So when we look at elections, obviously there's been a lot of conversation all year long about election security and election integrity. And it's been pretty interesting to hear, right? Because some individuals think that paper is the way to go, that there is nothing more secure than let's go back to a piece of paper. Let's just check in the boxes and go and turn it into and put it inside of a sealed box or sealed briefcase or whatever. And that is the most secure way because it can't be hacked and it can't be done. However, on the other side of it, I think a lot of people on here would agree, is that there is technology that can make things a lot safer even than paper. So you have other folks that want to go to the technology side. And for the most part, when you go vote, what you'll see is it does both. Right now, today, I just voted yesterday for our local elections that we had. And there's a computer that records your vote, but of course it also prints out a piece of paper, which is your receipt. And that piece of paper goes into a scanner that goes and make sure you can do that. So I think we're working on it from the election machine side, but one of my fears and one of my worries is related to each county individually is in charge for the cybersecurity and for the maintenance of their elections. And not every county is Harris County. Not every county is Dallas County or Tarrant County. There are some that just don't have that. So what I want to make sure is part of our funding mechanisms and even through this blockchain council, what can we do to improve those? Also wanted to talk to you, and I'll close here in just a few minutes, so that if you have any questions related to any of the things that we're talking about. But some of the other things that I'm working on that I think are going to be key, that I'll be working on next session in order to go and help with the state's cybersecurity stance, is on the topic of artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence is something that we put into law a little bit, that it's something that's eligible for things that can be procured and contracted out. I think we have to get to the next level on that, right? I think having those tools, whether it, and at the end of the day, people call it AI, but it's sophisticated neural networks that are running on cloud servers, whether it's just the collecting of that information in order to smartly act on it, can do a lot of wonderful things. During COVID, for instance, we had really bad time, and obviously a lot of people were unemployed very quickly. In fact, more than had ever happened in such a short amount of time in Texas. So we had call centers, we did all that, but if you have friends and others who had to reach the unemployment department, they realized that they just couldn't get through. So what Texas Workforce Commission did is they set up an app so that the app could go and have conversations with individuals and be able to get them to the right person, and if it could, figure out how to get them that information. That's kind of the low-level AI. But anyway, that's one of the things that I think the state can go and speed up its advancements on. I filed a bill last session where it didn't go anywhere, but I do think it was important, and it started a conversation, and I'm going to keep having this conversation about whether or not the state should allow any of its entities to pay for ransomware. So what my bill said is that no, that local entities cannot pay ransomware. I would love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on whether we should ban government, not businesses, okay, but whether the government should ban ransomware. And part of my rationale for having that thought, but looking forward to any debate on it, is there's no guarantee, of course, that by paying it, you're going to get the information. You kind of set yourself up, I think, a little way to be hit again. And listen, we're funding bad actors, right? I don't believe that taxpayer dollars should go, even if it's through a third party, through an insurance company, should go to reward and incentivize and possibly improve the abilities of these bad actors to go and make more attacks. And what we're seeing anyway is that after you pay the ransom, in some cases, it then turns into extortionware. We're like, okay, well, now we'll let you have access to it, but we've kept a copy of that as well. So it's something I want to keep having a conversation about. And I think I'm going to push forward again next session, unless some of you on here could talk me out of it. But I don't see how it's helpful to the state for us to allow continued payments to ransomware. I'm going to be working again on digital privacy issues. I would say that goes hand in hand. There's an intersection there with cybersecurity. And then finally, what I want all of you to know, again, in closing is, and again, open any questions, is why we're doing this, okay? At this point, I would say there's no bigger risk to the state of Texas, right? We've been able to handle a lot of disaster, and people have suffered, okay? Even, you know, whether it's the pandemic or whether it's flooding and all those kind of things, and a lot of those and all of those are outside of our control, right? I mean, no one can stop COVID, no one can stop the hurricane and stuff. And so for me, these attacks are different, right? These are things that, to a big extent, to a big level, it's a little bit of shame on us if we're not fully prepared or prepared as much as we can to prevent these sorts of attacks. And one of the ways we could do that is not just passing legislation and all of that, but something that is, anyway, it's a problem for everybody right now, right? I was driving just the other day. I was going to the store and I saw one of those little vans, you know, that has the digital billboards on the side, which is usually advertising something, one of those trucks you can rent, except it was doing it for wanting to hire people at the local Pizza Hut. And it was saying, hey, now hiring at Pizza Hut, $20 an hour. And not only, I think, is that, you know, obviously a lot of money and opportunity, but that's the extent that some people are looking to find their workforce. I would say cybersecurity experts are even higher up and even more difficult. And so it's just, how do we as a state make sure that we have enough experts in this field, for instance? So one of the things that I did in Senate Bill 1, which is a bill in the appropriations bill that passed, is I put $3 million in the higher education council, and it's for upskilling, right? So one of the things that we've always done in the state is make sure that we have enough welders and we have enough plumbers and we do all that kind of stuff, which is absolutely important. Anyone who's trying to get that done knows how important that is. But what this fund does, it's an upskill fund, right? So it's to go and work on the kind of higher level cybersecurity and financial experts to be able to go and work in coordination with private industry and with local community colleges to be able to provide basically incentives and subsidies and support to make sure that we have even more people in this field, and whether it's IT modernization, cybersecurity, AI, blockchain, or just fintech in general, we're able to do that. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do in closing, everything from workforce to security to trying to understand it, to try and get the members involved. But again, we can't do any of this without your support. We can't do any of this without your expertise. And so I just want to make myself available. I know your local state rep and senator also want to make themselves available to hear you and to try and get your perspective so that we can go and continue to help make sure that Texas is protected from all of these attacks. Thank you.
Representative Capriglione, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure because not only you authoring legislation to try and protect, you know, businesses and all Texans, but you're an engineer, you know this stuff as well. So I mean, that you have so much credibility. Thanks for all that you're doing.
No, thank you. And I've always enjoyed being a nerd. In fact, I just built the last couple of weeks, I just built my own PC again. I hadn't done that in a while. So
love it.
And today was the first time I used the webcam on it, so I'm just really glad that worked.
So this is your home built one that you're using now?
Yeah. I've been really trying to get into machine learning and deep learning. And so I wanted to build a computer that lets me play around with some of these neural networks. And so anyway, I probably spent a little bit too much time and money on this one. But anyway, I got dual boot. I got Linux and Windows going on it. So I'm just trying to get there. But sadly, it's you know, we need to get everyone in the government to have just as much technology. And maybe not as much knowledge as you have, but a little bit, some awareness. I mean, I know in my own work, I deal with that a lot. It's just this total lack of awareness sometimes that this is even a risk. Yeah. I had some questions from the audience. I have a lot of questions over. I want to make sure we answer the audience ones first. One was House Bill
475, how individuals could volunteer to join the working group?
Sure. There's a few different ways to do that. And I'll say, if you want to know more about it, and I'll say it slowly, maybe I'll put it in the chat too. Just go to capital.texas.gov, and in there, just look for SB 475, and you can look at the bill, and it has a whole entire section on how to do it. But you can either talk to your state rep, okay, or you can just call the Department of Information Resources directly. So if you go and Google and just type in Department of Information Resources, just let them know you're interested and you're willing to help. So anyway, I put a link there for how you can get more information. But again, you can just call Department of Information Resources or call your state rep, and they can put you in contact. And the more people, the better.
That's great. Thanks. Another was for the IT caucus. You're touring various cities and places around Houston.
Yeah.
I know one of those requests was for San Antonio. I work there in San Antonio too, as well. That would be, there's a big group there involved in cyber with, I think,
okay.
And I'm happy to help coordinate that as others.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't, if you could just get with contact. We have an executive director. His name is Spencer Schumacher, and he's the one that's setting up all of those. And so my goal is, I had an awesome time when I went to UTSA to go, and we had one of our cybersecurity events right at UTSA, and want to go back there. There's a lot of technology everywhere from, NSA to Rackspace or whatever, everything in between. So we could definitely do that with the San Antonio delegation.
Yeah, no, that would be, and they started a new school there of community health and policy. Dean Kostman is leading that. And I think that you're right. UTSA might be a great convener for something like that. Well, I will sync up with you on that. And Liz and Reva, keep me straight so I don't mention. One of the other questions was, are there any developments in quantum cybersecurity at the government level?
Ooh, no, that's next level for Texas. I'm interested in the conversation. I would have to check. Maybe some of our universities are doing some research in there. But no, like I said, some of us are still on COBOL here in the States. So quantum's a couple of spins away. So
no, that's fair enough. I think one of the interesting things you said, and again, my own bias, I'm working with a lot of rural physician offices around Texas and rural hospitals, and you mentioned the school districts that just don't have the cyber resources to be able to do a whole lot. And part of Cyber Houston, one of our missions, or our main mission, has been in that supply chain. How do we elevate those weak links in the chain, those small businesses that are connecting to you? I mean, we go back to the Target hack. It wasn't Target it was an HVAC contractor that was sloppy with the security, and that was the way in.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would be interested in, and especially that funding for House Bill 4018. How do we best help these small organizations, which are an easy way, if you're a hacker, to get in to bigger systems? Yeah,
I think you make a good point with Target, and I think a lot of times when people think about third-party risk, that's what they think about, right? A contractor, a vendor, or whatever, who's now plugged into your system. But in a way, maybe an analogy is that some of these smaller counties are a third-party risk to the state, right? Because they're set up, they're linked. There's obviously communication between the counties and the state. So yeah, it's been a couple of years, but about a couple of years ago, of course, 20 of these smaller cities and counties and part of the department were all hit one day. Big, huge attack that happened. And some of the things that we need to make sure is, okay, so one, we have these regional service centers so that we could go and provide that support. We can have volunteer response as well. And I don't know, maybe, when you think about, growing up, there was doctors who, as part of their residency or whatever, would have to go to more rural areas to go and help support there. there's a way virtually, I think we can do that as well. But I think with this funding, right, what we want to be able to do is say, okay, so here's an idea. We believe in local control in Texas. Every city and county should be able to listen to their community as well. But the state has a lot of resources, right? So what we're doing is we're setting up kind of even procurement side, right? And say, listen, you can go and procure whatever technology you want. We understand, but the state has gone and it's validated these, they've vetted these. So rather than just finding an off-the-shelf thing that you may, what would be great is if we could somehow not steer, but incentivize some of these local communities to say, hey, use these because we understand these and they're not a risk. Use these volunteers and providers. So that's one way. But at the end of the day, I remember when I was at UTSA, we heard a lot of testimony, and this one fellow from a very, very small county came, and he was the IT department for this county, right? Everything from the elections to the vitals information and so on. And all I kept thinking was, well, who's doing it while you're here, right? And the answer is nobody. So they need more help.
They do. No, agree. Another question from Victor in San Antonio is asking, does it help to have checks and balances with options to assist law enforcement to thwart bad actors?
Yeah, and I would say that's a great question because, listen, I could talk about technology all day, but it's the Constitution forever, right? And so you have things like the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment, things like that. And it's important for us, and they're contentious right now, right? Because there's always this conversation of, on one side, which is you can't, whatever, it's said wrong, but you shouldn't give up any liberty for security. And on the other side, some people might say, well, if you have nothing to hide, then what does it matter, right? I think it's important for us to keep the Constitution in mind when we work on that. I think that's when I talk about ethics and morals and law. We need to do that. And those subjects come up a lot when it comes to facial technology. And I think we have to be careful about that kind of stuff, right? I don't want to just walk down the street and get misidentified as someone else. And that's not fair to anybody. And so, it's come up a lot also with, should law enforcement have the key, right? Whether it's have the ability to decrypt. I say no, right? I mean, it's hard enough to prevent backdoors, let alone having even more people know what's going on. So that's me. But that's a battle, and it'll always be a battle. And I would say it's a bipartisan battle, right? Where people, doesn't matter what party you're on, you have your own feelings on whether law enforcement should have access to all of that. I'm on the side of no.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And I want to, maybe, and we're still getting some questions. Thank you again, getting a lot of great questions, and maybe I have to save some for later. But I want to answer your question and maybe ask the audience for a straw poll of, should we pay ransomware? I'll put my hand in the table and say, no, we should not. I agree with you because it just encourages it. I mean, if the only reason this ransomware is put on there is to extort money, and if they don't get any money out of it, they eventually quit doing it. And it's the shortest path to that. So I want to ask the audience, because I know you were looking for feedback on that. And if anyone disagrees or agrees, please put it in there. While they're doing that, Bugaboo Jones, what can be done to stop the constant pump and dumps rampant in the cryptocurrency space? It feels like just one big scam at this point.
Well, and that's something that's come up. And when I went to this Texas Blockchain Council event, it was awesome. First of all, I mean, you had Ted Cruz there, you had Senator Cornyn there, you had a lot of government and private sector people that are interested in it. And what I sensed, and I don't normally sense this, is I think people realize there needs to be some sort of financial regulations when it comes to cryptocurrency, right? There's some on the SEC side from trading. But I think for the legitimacy of cryptocurrency, for the legitimacy of blockchain. So one of the things that I'm going to be filing that I proposed is a constitutional amendment to allow certain cryptocurrency to be used to pay, for instance, your taxes, right? To kind of completely legitimize. But with that comes some sort of regulations, I think, on the state level that stop some of these, completely fake coins that aren't even as nice as tulips, but being treated just as much.
Right. No, I'm sorry, we're out of time and we're getting more questions and more feedback. I'm not sure if you see that in the chat.
I don't.
Some people are pro, some people are no, because this, the ransomware payment, because if you can put you out of a business if you're a small business, or if you're a hospital trying to take care of patients and you can't. So I think good arguments in there.
Sure.
We could keep you here all day, Representative Capriglione.
Yeah, no problem.
But I know I need to let you go. And thank you again so much for your time. Thanks for doing this. It's great to see you, and we'll see each other in person soon.
Yeah, hopefully in San Antonio. All right, see you. Bye.
Thanks now. Bye.